Sasha here from The Little Duck Retreat. You can find us at www.thelittleduckretreat.com, in addition to our Facebook and our Instagram page where we do cute pictures of dogs every single day, in addition to video. So today we're going to talk about hydration hacks and ways you can get your dog to drink water or to stay hydrated either both in the summer and the winter. A lot of people forget that you can still have dehydration in the middle of winter even though it's cold. So a couple different things. First and foremost, what is dehydration? Dehydration is basically one of two elements. Either your dog is not getting enough water, so they're not consuming enough water, or your dog is losing water rapidly. So your dog can lose water in multiple ways. They can either have vomiting or diarrhea, or another way is just through panting. So many people, if your dog's playing a lot, you're going to see them go and pant. But if your dog is, let's say, in the corner and they're not exerting any energy, but they're just sitting there panting, they're actually losing that moisture from their body. So dogs don't sweat like humans do, but they do lose moisture, and they get rid of their heat through their mouth. So if your dog is panting, chances are they're going to need some water. The best way to do this is just keep fresh, clean water available 24/7 for your dog in an easy, accessible way, something that's an elevation that they can get access to without having to reach too high up, or also be too far down so that they don't actually either get it up their nose or consume it and then vomit it up. There are multiple ways to make sure that your dog is actually getting enough water, but I'm going to show you my favorite tricks here and my hydration hacks that I use for my daycare and my guest pups, and also for my 3 dogs who are extremely picky. So a couple of different things. One of my dogs, my Chihuahua in particular, likes to consume a lot of water and then she'll just vomit it all up, which is basically, it defeats the entire purpose of staying hydrated. So what I do with her first and foremost is I like to wet down her kibble. So there's a couple things to remember here. Dogs, just like humans, since we are similar enough, we are basically 80%, roughly 80% made up of water. So are your dogs. So a couple different things here. The hydration on your dog is basically going to aid in cell division and cell function. It's going to aid in digestion. It's going to aid in circulation, and it's also going to help basically pull things through the body and get rid of waste and particles inside the body. So it's really important that your dog has enough water for their body to physically do everything it needs to do during the day. So ways that you can do that. I like to take kibble and soak it in water. I'm going to show you back here my neat little toys. So basically, everyone's probably kind of done this, especially if your dog's just kind of getting kind of antsy or maybe loses interest in their food. Basic kibble stuck in a cute little dish, basically with some water in it. So I let this sit for 3 to 5 minutes. It does 2 things. It actually fluffs up the kibble just a little bit. We use a natural-based dried kibble that doesn't fluff too much, but the more fillers, it'll actually fluff more. So the less fillers, it won't really get kind of poofy, but it will still hydrate the kibble no matter what. So that's exciting, and it makes it a little bit more interesting for the dog to eat, and then they're consuming just a little bit of water during that. And then also the water that sits in there with the kibble will start to taste like the kibble. So all of a sudden your dog thinks that it's a treat. So they'll start to consume that also. So that's kind of the first easiest way to do it, especially if you just came home from work and your dog's panting, or you just don't have time, you've got to leave, and you just want to make sure they're going to drink their water. I would do that. The next thing you can kind of do, and I usually shy away from sticking treats directly into water, just because if you stick a bowl of water, you stick some shredded cheese in there, or you stick some meat in there, chances are the dog's just going to stick their snout in there, they're going to get it up their nose, they'll consume the treats, but they're going to leave the water. So you want them to really get the water, mostly, not just the little bits and pieces that you stick inside of it. So what I usually go for is ice. Now, ice is kind of tricky because you don't want to just give a dog an ice cube. Many breeds will actually have a hard time consuming that ice cube, not actually eating it, but once it hits their stomach, it changes the temperature of their body and actually can cause bloat. So you don't want to just give them an ice cube by itself in a standard, kind of your natural like freezer ice cube tray, or your refrigerator ice cubes that may fall down into a cup. You want to give them something large enough that they can't just swallow whole, and at least maybe that it's melting before, and so the temperature's changing before it actually gets into their stomach. So what I usually do is I like these old school sort of 1950s Jello molds, basically is what these are. You can find these at mostly any thrift store, thrift antique store, garage sales. You can find them brand new on places like Amazon and whatnot, but these usually will cost you maybe $2 or $3 at a thrift store. So just make sure they're not rusted, make sure that they are in good shape. But basically these are old school Jello molds. And then what I usually do with these, you can also use like little dishes like this where it's a little tiny kid bunt pan. Those are also really fun. You can find those at thrift stores also. What I do with these is I start to do a freeze layer. So I'll stick some water in here and then some cheese and I'll freeze it. And then I'll do maybe like a layer of blueberries and more water and freeze it. And then maybe another layer of cheese and then maybe a layer of banana and then maybe another layer of cheese. And so it's got kind of like this almost like cake type layer consistency. It's freezing at different points, so not everything freezes at the very top. So when you flip it over, you've got all of these frozen elements and then nothing in the rest of it. So this will take about a day to kind of prepare, and then when you flip it over, especially if you're going to be gone, let's say you're going to do like a day trip and your dog's going to be home just hanging out in the house, you might want to do this early on, and then just make sure that you're doing things that are, if you're going to put any meat in there, that they're small enough pieces they're not going to choke on them. So I'm referring mostly to little dogs choking on stuff, not big dogs, but it's still important to make sure you're only putting elements that your dog can chew. So based on their teeth and their health of their mouth, make sure that your dog can chew and actually eat them. I'll show you what this basically looks like. I have one that's been prepped with chicken, but it doesn't have any actual chicken pieces, it's chicken broth. So another thing that I'll do instead of just using water is I will literally boil chicken and then create basically in these little molds, I will create a chicken broth cube. Now I don't use bouillon cubes, I use literally just human grade chicken, and we have a filtered process on our machine, on our sink, but so I use filtered water, but basically this is what it looks like. It's been sitting here for a few minutes, so it's kind of cooling off, but this is it. And so if you can kind of see, there's little bits of chicken here in the top, and the rest this is chicken water. So my guests and my personal dogs literally will go bananas over this. So this is large enough that it's not something they can consume so fast that it's in their stomach and then they're having a seizing issue with temperature change. But they'll just lick and lick and lick and lick and lick, trying to get those little actual particulates of chicken. But then the whole thing tastes like chicken. So no matter what they're licking, they're still tasting something exciting and they're hydrating because of it. So that is one of my favorite go-to solutions in making sure that your dog is staying hydrated. The next one I have, and this is just a cute little tray. This is a Kong tray, so you can pretty much pick this up on like Amazon or some of the dog stores such as like Petco or PetSmart. And so pretty much these are the smaller cubes. These actually fit inside the giant Kong squeeze chews. And so instead of doing something like this smearable, what I consider pretend cheese, these are actually, again, this is an actual boiled chicken water that I freeze, and then I'll stick these in there. And so they're just kind of licking that small opening and getting them out. And then as it melts, then they're licking up all the water. So this is just another fun, easy way to stay hydrated in the summer or the winter. And again, you can put things like shredded cheese, you can put blueberries, you can put bananas, you can put, mashed up kibble, wet food, anything that's going to entice your dog, tuna fish, anything that oils, if your dog has a favorite oil that they like to lick up, any of that can go inside of these and just freeze them. Again, I like freezing them in layers so that they're not all clumped in the top and basically the bottom of the tray, and then when you flip it over, they're all in the top and the rest is wasted. So I like to do them in layers, but that's just one of the big ways. Now, if your dog is having a medical emergency, again, bring them to the vet, let the vet kind of help you figure out what's going on. A lot of people don't necessarily have, the experience in figuring out if their dog is actually going through dehydration or not. So here's what I'm going to recommend. If your dog is showing signs of lethargia, if your dog is showing signs of dizziness, wobbling, if your dog is panting and can't stop panting. So for instance, they're panting, they'll drink some water and they pant some more, and it's, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes are going by. My recommendation is bring your dog to a vet, or at least call the vet and start to get some clues and some insight into whatever behavior your dog is doing versus what the vet might recommend right off the bat. Now, if you know your dog, and I work with toy breeds, so toy breeds are kind of notorious for having, hydrating issues or eating issues and just being really finicky with their food and water day by day. So if you just have, let's say, a Shih Tzu who is just really, really picky, or you have, a Havanese who just doesn't like to drink water for a day, that's okay. You know your dog best. So you know your dog's habits and routines, their personality and their quirks. So vet training will tell us pretty much, they go by the rule of 3. So your dog can go about 3 weeks really without food. Wait, let me think for a second. Yes. 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, and 3 minutes without air. That's kind of the rule of thumb for vet training. However, what I have found is, obviously, if a dog was starving and out in the forest or something like that, and they were really on their own, they might be able to go that distance, but they're not going to go that distance without complications. So basically, I like to go the one route. So the kind of the 1 minute or the 1 day or the 1 week rule. So if your dog hasn't eaten in a week, that becomes a problem. If your dog hasn't had any water or consumed any water for a full 24 hours, that becomes a problem. Or if your dog has, obviously, if they stop breathing for more than a minute, that becomes a problem. So since we're talking about hydration today, let's go for the 1 rule, 24-hour time frame. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you find your dog and they're just, kind of like iffy and they're in the corner not hanging out, and you notice that their bowl hasn't been touched. That's okay. Give them time. Try to give them something that's exciting and make the water more exciting and editable and enticing. But if you find that your dog has not been hydrated for 1 full day, you don't need to rush them to the vet for hydration, because they will go ahead and put them on an IV drip and hydrate their body just as a precaution, but that will cost you money. So before going that route, unless you know that your dog is having some kind of extra issue, what I would do is, number 1, try the kibble and try the ice first. If that does not work for you, or let's say you have a finicky dog like my Chihuahua who will drink a bunch of water and just throw it up, what I start to do is I start to put blockades in the water. So you can do this very easily with rocks. So if you have a nice flat dish, basically just, like a standard plate at home, they usually have at least enough of a curve that you can put a thin layer of water or a thin layer of chicken broth in there. Then what you're going to do is literally wash some outdoor garden rocks. The size will greatly vary upon the size of your dog. So if you have a small dog, a small rock. If you have a big dog with a big mouth, maybe a good size, fist size rock. And what you're going to do is obviously make sure they're nice and clean. You're going to stick them sort of strategically around the bowl. So your dog has to literally lick around and move their head around. Couple of the complications with dogs that vomit water is they're consuming it so quickly, they're getting mostly air into their stomach. And then that bloating is preventing their diaphragm from allowing the water to settle and then start to become really absorbed. So you want to kind of prevent the air flow from getting in there and just let them lap up the actual water. And putting any kind of barricade and making them kind of move around to get the water will assist in that. The other thing you can do is pretty much what I like to do with my Chihuahua, and she's right here, but she'll probably start growling if I pick her up right now. So is I'll let her drink the water. She is about a 6-pound Chihuahua, so she's pretty short and pretty close to the floor. So her water does not need to be elevated. But one of the things you can do is also get an elevated tray, or just stick it on like a book or on like a box and let the dog drink from there. That will also assist in their tongue lapping up the water without getting too much air. So your dog, when they drink, if my hand was a tongue, they are actually scooping from behind they're actually scooping the water like this into their mouth. They're not like drinking it like a person would. They are literally scooping. So it's a complicated mixture of muscle and tissue that's actually happening. And as dogs get older, that just kind of wears down and becomes a little bit harder. Also, if your dog has any trachea issues, swallowing could be an issue. So just kind of watch your dog and figure out that point at which they are most comfortable drinking water. The next thing you could do to prevent the vomiting thereafter, and this does take its toll, is pretty much I don't hydrate my dog. I don't allow my Chihuahua to drink water unless I am actually able to physically monitor her. So that might sound kind of bad, but again, in my business, my profession, I'm here all the time. So if I know that I'm going to be distracted for the next 30 to 45 minutes, I'm not going to give her water. But if I know, in 10 minutes I can do it, that's when I give her water. So she will alert me to when she's thirsty, and I will go ahead and let her drink the water. And then what I do literally is I just pick her up, I put her in a vertical form on my arm, and then I burp her like a baby. So this actually, just like a human baby, all of that moisture is getting, or all of that water is being consumed and stuck in their belly, and they just don't have the diaphragm muscles, the strength to really kind of start to get everything adjusted. And so as dogs get older, their diaphragm muscles and their trachea and everything just gets a little bit weaker. And so you can literally just burp them. Now you can do this with a small dog. It's a lot easier, obviously, because you can just burp them like a baby. You can also do this with a larger dog. You're just going to pretty much get on your knees and kind of, sit on their knees, have them kind of put their arms on you on their both ways. I would suggest on just one side, just so they don't burp in your face, but you can just put their legs right on one side and then pretty much burp them. Now, when you're burping them, you're not gonna like hit their ribs, you're not gonna like do it really, really hard, but you are gonna do it a little bit lower. So pretty much find their rib cage just below the ribs, and you're just gonna slightly pap until you get a burp out of them. And then usually most of the cases, your dog's burped, the airs come out, and then they can actually start to absorb that water without any complication, and you're good. And then you can kind of go about your day or your afternoon. So these are ways to kind of make sure your dog can hydrate. Now, a couple of other things, again, with the rule of 3 with vet training, your dog really can go about 3 days without water. However, you are going to start to see complications if they have not had any water in 3 days. So I would recommend trying to get them to hydrate before that. And a vet's definitely going to charge you for that IV, just for the fluid intake. So plus in addition of whatever else they test while they're there. So to go to the vet is kind of an extreme way. Now, if you have a dog that does need kind of fluid, and you've got to kind of force those electrolytes into their body, my best suggestion outside of the natural remedies is basically use Pedialyte, just standard flavorless child Pedialyte. So it has the sugar and salt ratio that's appropriate for replenishing those electrolytes in the body. And it's mild enough on the system that it's not going to harm them. And so pretty much you can do 2 things with this. If your dog will just drink it out of a bowl or a dish, that's fantastic. Usually at that point, if I'm going Pedialyte, a dog really is refusing to drink. Either they're depressed, they have another medical condition that may not need vet support, but they are recovering from, let's say. And what I usually do is I syringe it. So you can just buy a standard natural syringe from pretty much any pharmacy or grocery store, and then you pretty much just take usually about 5 milliliters is roughly kind of the standard to kind of start to get the hydration in there. And then literally what you're going to do is you're going to put it in the back of their mouth, usually the cheek side, so it's not directly going down their throat, but you're just going to kind of slowly squeeze it in. And then if you want to mix that with anything exciting like chicken water or beef water, that's fantastic. I usually recommend chicken water just because it has a lower fat content. But if you have a dog that is really being picky, beef or bacon or any of the other, higher fat content meats are totally fine to hydrate or do any of the boiling system. So when you do your own bouillon, you're pretty much taking whatever meat source that you want. You're sticking it in about 3 to 5 cups of water on a pan, and you're literally boiling it until it's cooked. And then all of that water that's in there, you just literally pour it into something else, allow it to cool, and that is your natural bouillon. So don't add salt. You don't need to add any kind of sugars. You don't need to add any kind of herbs or anything extra to it. But but that flavored water is pretty much what you're going to be hydrating your dog with. So, and then you can freeze it, you can store it. I typically will only store natural water like that for about 3 days, just because after that, you know, it becomes kind of greasy and gross. So listeria can actually start to grow in water like that. That's not a concern necessarily for dogs, just because dogs actually don't have the same response to listeria, which is a bacteria that grows on meat, that humans do. But I tend to make sure that everything is natural and fresh. So, those are my suggestions for hydrating your dog. You can probably hear my chihuahua starting to want my attention down below. And then a couple of the other things that I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned. Let's see. Oh yes, another fun thing that I like to do is actually freeze yogurt. So this is pretty common, but if you have a new dog, or if you have a dog that you've never given people food to, which is fantastic, I'll just say you're doing a great job. But if you start to find that they're not hydrating, I would mix it with yogurt, or in my case, I love using sour cream. So here's my chihuahua. So what I usually do is I mix it with sour cream. So I'll do kind of a 1-to-2 ratio. So 2 parts water, or 2 parts bouillon, and then 1 part sour cream. And that completely changes the perspective of the dog when they're looking at the ice cube or they're looking at the water. All of a sudden it becomes like an ice cream cone to them, and they just consume it like that. So now, if you are having a problem and you're trying to hydrate a dog and they're just not taking it, again, any of the things I suggested making, you can always put into that syringe and just squeeze into their mouth. And then when you are squeezing something into their mouth, again, you just want to get, I'm going to use you as an example, you just want to get it into the corner. You just want to get into the corner of the, I know, grr, the corner of their mouth, and not directly down the center, because anything that's going in there is going to be fine. So a lot of times once you start getting your dog hydrated, their natural instincts are to keep consuming water. All of a sudden they kind of click back into their instincts and they're like, oh, I am thirsty, I am hungry, and they'll drink and consume the water. Again, if your dog has not hydrated within 24 hours and you're noticing that they're starting to go downhill, seek advice from your vet. Even if you don't go in for an actual appointment, definitely give them a call and start to see if there's something else that needs to be addressed. So if you have any questions, I would love to hear from you. Definitely join our private Facebook group called I Speak Dog Training Club, where we talk about tricks and hacks and training, and it's a nice safe place that you can ask questions and without any kind of embarrassment or without any kind of judgment. And if you are a new pet owner or an existing seasoned owner, we would love to have you. Couple other things. Let's see. We will be doing this for the entire month of August, and if you have anything that you're curious about, I would love to make a video for you. So let me know in the comments below, or you can also just comment on the Facebook page or on Instagram, and I will see you again later. I hope you like, subscribe, and share this content. Have a great day. Thanks.